Prior to being with Extension, I worked with the grounds department, Northwest Missouri State, and my main job was working with trees and shrubs there. In the wintertime, we called ourselves the Snow Patrol, and we used a lot of ice melt, different materials. And there is a lot of things out there. Probably a common thing we see, or the least expensive, is sodium chloride, which is salt. That can damage concrete. And so you want to really be careful using that on concrete. Cheaper may not always be better in that case. It can also build up in your soils, cause plant damage, and also salt can rust metal objects, railings, patio furniture, that type of thing. Probably the most common material we use, on our walkways and driveways, that type of thing, is calcium chloride. That's the little white pellets you see that's available in a lot of the retail market. Rightly so that it's usually fairly inexpensive. It's very effective because it can work down to 25 degrees below Fahrenheit, and it can cause some plant damage. And we saw that on campus. I've got some pictures I'll show a little later on. And all this we're talking about, we want to think about using it in moderation. And I always think, well, what is moderation? There may be some directions on the product that you buy. It kind of tells you the use of it. And I guess my thought of moderation is if you don't have to use it, do something else. And we'll talk a little more about that. But you want to be careful of these products. The other things we see are, urea, potassium chloride, magnesium chloride. And those are all used in fertilizers or a type of fertilizer. And they can also damage plants and concrete if over applied. There's one other product, calcium magnesium acetate. CMA, it's made from dolomitic lime, which is a lime material that has magnesium in it, and acetic acid or vinegar. And it works a little differently. The others will melt and cause kind of a brine type material. The CMA prevents the snow from sticking to surfaces, but it has to be higher temperatures for it to work very well. It is one, though, that doesn't affect the plants and concrete really very much, but also you have to have higher temperatures for it to work. And the idea we're trying to do and what we did at Northwest is to try to keep people safe, whether it was the students or people visiting campus. We wanted to have a safe surface for them to drive or walk on. So I've kind of mentioned moderation when using any kind of material to use on ice or snow. What happens if we overuse a material and we don't have the rainfall to leach or wash it out of the soil? That's when we can start seeing damage to plants. This third bullet, that's where I came in when I was working. I was kind of the young guy and the last one hired. So I did a lot of removing snow by hand, and that's an option. You want to be careful with doing that. Another thing you can do, and we did some of this, was sand areas, use sand. You can also get kind of a cinder type material, it's called. I know other people have talked about using kitty litter and that type of thing. I don't know how that would be, but any other kind of abrasive material, you might be able to use that than looking at some type of chemical to control the snow and ice. Some symptoms we may see if it's been overused, stunted lawn, stunted grass, and this generally, it's pretty obvious come next spring. Along the sidewalks is where you'll see this damage. You may see deciduous plants that look scorched, although this will be in spring and it looks like summer leaf scorch. It may cause wilting. I think that would probably be pretty excessive, but difference in colors, maybe a blue-green cast rather than a darker green. Those might be some symptoms you might see on the plants. So let's look at some pictures just to give you an idea of what may happen. This upper right, this is a deciduous plant that shows the leaf scorch along the edge. The lower left, I thought that was a good shot of looks like some yews along a sidewalk where it's obviously the salt or ice melt slush was kind of splashed up on the lower part of the plants. Then also on the left side, you can see where the grass didn't come back in areas by the sidewalk where they've applied ice melt materials. Another shot, looks like a little juniper where salt or calcium chloride, snow-laden material in the snow was up against the shrub. Then also along the edge of the sidewalk, as I mentioned, that's generally where you'll see the most damage if you have some from these materials. We can reduce the injury by leaching those areas with water, try to leach it out. Actually, our MU soil test lab, we can do a test for soluble salts. If you suspect an area in your landscape may have excess salts, you can do that and find out for sure, and then figure out what the levels may need to be for the plants in that area. You may read about gypsum. Gypsum can be added. It displaces the salt in the soil so they can be leached out. And there's guidelines on that. There's information out there on that if you get into where you really need to do something. So when we're using the milters, we just need to think ahead, think about the nearby plants, use moderation. If you've got an area of walkway where it's melted and it's really wet, if you could channel that salty runoff away from the plants, that would be helpful. And then again, I would look at either shoveling by hand or using some other abrasive material to make that walkway safe for people.